The name Harold Wilson doesn't ring many bells, at least not yet. That's because neither his conviction nor his exoneration has led to many headlines. And other than his family, people in his Philadelphia neighborhood, or folks on death row, his name was a cipher, virtually unknown until now. In mid-November 2005, Harold Wilson walked away from prison and away from the long hearts of Pennsylvania's death row after a Philadelphia jury fully acquitted him of not one, not two, but 3 counts of first-degree murder. Convicted back in 1989, Wilson spent nearly a decade on death row before a lower court threw out his death sentence for ineffectiveness of counsel. It would take 4 more years until his new trial was granted because the DA used unfair and unconstitutional methods to choose his first trial jury. The Philadelphia prosecutor violated the Batson rule by improperly removing blacks from his jury. Surprisingly, the DA didn't appeal his new trial ruling. It would take several long, torturous years, but in late 2005, a full and fair jury decided what it took 16 years to prove, that Harold C. Wilson was not guilty, and thus he was acquitted. According to the Death Penalty Information Center, Wilson became the 122nd person found to have been wrongfully and erroneously convicted, sent to death row, and freed, released from prison. What led to his liberation was DNA evidence which showed that blood on items said to have connected him to the crime scene didn't come from any of the victims, nor Wilson himself. What a difference a jury makes. Wilson's freedom, coming as it did just days before the legalized lynching of the late Stanley Tukey Williams, shows us that just because one was convicted doesn't mean one is guilty. Harold could easily still be encaged to the bitter confines of Pennsylvania's death row if some little things happened differently. That's because the DA has held that the jury error could be traced to one bad apple instead of the entire office. And as we have seen, even after Batson, Philadelphia prosecutors have sought to find creative and unique ways to craft all-white or predominantly white juries by striking blacks off. 16 years in the dungeons of death row to hear the words he should have heard in 1989, not guilty. What does this say about the system? That it's slow, but it works? How do you repay 16 years in hell? Harold Wilson takes a long-awaited walk to freedom. In a truly fair system, he should never have been caged in the first place. From death row, this is Mumia Abu-Jamal.
Good afternoon, brothers and sisters. My name is Harold Wilson. I'm the 122nd exonerated death row prisoner in the U.S. and the 6th exonerated death row prisoner in Pennsylvania. You know, I have a lot story for you. I also want to take this time to thank Leslie and Jason for inviting me here today for the first annual Lock Conference. You know, I spent 17 and a half years with Mumia Abu-Jamal in Pennsylvania's death row. And I grew up in the city of Philadelphia, South Street, the city of brotherly love, known to most of us in Philadelphia and around the state.
What's your front building?
Right? Who you talking about, Move? Okay. But I learned a lot about women's abuse, alcoholism, drug dealing, drug abuse. And I learned a lot about police brutality and their first-hand abuse and violence by the call of Frank Rizzo. I grew up in the city of Philadelphia. I came to know Pan Africa before and after she gave me my first job as a youth. Her name was Jeanette Knight then. She told you the story about how she came in to the power and the wisdom of move. Jeanette Knight rounded up a lot of us young youths in the community. And she, at that point in time, she was working for the city. And I think it was the Green administration, Mayor Green. And Pam made sure that everybody, all the young youths in the around this community could have an opportunity to have their papers, their work permits signed, filled out properly. And we converted an old fire station into a youth development center. And all of us brothers and sisters around the community, we took care of all the children, served them the lunches, took them to the park and watched over them and helped them with their schoolwork. You know, we fed them. You know, and I used to stay back, I used to work the hardest, and I used to stick with the children most, and whatever was left over from the day's activities, I used to put it on, strap it up on the back of my bike, take it all through the community. You know, majority of the time it was milks. And I used to sell milks for $1 each or whatever I can get, 12 for $1, whatever. And all this information got back to Pam. I come to work one morning, and she waited to the end of the day. I grabbed the milks, strapped them down on the back of my bike. I'm going to hustle. And Pam said, let me tell you something. What you going to do with them milks? I'm going to give them away. She said, let me tell you something right now. You see them milks right there? Don't you ever let anybody come to me and tell me that you're selling those milks to our people. You're going to get them milks away. If you don't give them away, don't take them out here. And I remember that to this day. That Pam put the fear of God in me. I said, oh gosh, mess with my bit, mess with my hustle. You know, I ain't going to have no money in my pocket now other than, you know what I mean, what I get from my mom and my pop. So that's the story of me and Pam Africa coming into my life at that time and storing the fear of God in me. You know what I mean? Peddling the milk in the black community. My story of prison and the locks. You know, I was tried to get to 3 counts of first-degree murder. I went to death row on the basis of ineffective assistance of counsel, failure to investigate. And when I got on death row, I was transferred to Huntington State Prison, the dungeon of Huntington State. I mean, this prison was actually a colonial prison with colonial bars, you know, no windows on the cells other than the windows that you get your tray slid through. You know, we had raccoons, we had skunks, we had possums, we had everything running through there. Roaches, rats, you name it. And I used to go out in the yard, exercise, and watch Mumia Abu-Jamal's hands sling all around while he run around, you know, a little dog pen, but we did what we had to do back then. You know, it was all about survival. And, you know, I just started admiring the locks and the flow of the hair. So, dealing with that long torment, Huntington, death row, we moved to races behind SCI Green. It was December 2nd, 2005. And I remember that date so clearly because I was the first one brought off the bus. And when they bring you in, they push you up against the wall, they snap your pictures, they give you a cell, they assign you to a cell. You got to carry your little bag, and you go up to your cell, and they manually locked it behind you. You know, at one point, this was a new facility, but it was a super mag facility. the one where the racist guards and Guantanamo Bay trained to carry out their practice of abuse and torment, freezing cold temperatures, and sometimes you was put in cells, you know, if they feel as though you was disruptive to them, and you being disruptive to them would be, putting a towel to your door, trying to protect your modesty. And sometimes you strip naked in cells, and cold temperatures was unbearable. I suffer with chronic arthritis in my bones today. And it was just gracious, abusive torment. And this was the way of life at SCI Green for a long time, till we had to stand up and take charge of, put our lives on the line dealing with through hunger strikes. And brothers and sisters reaching out to their family members, death row family members, prison society, civil rights groups. And we all came together as one to make a change. You know, one of the most tormenting parts of my stay in 17 years of death row was witnessing suffering and pain and agony of others. You know, it wasn't about me. You know, I could see a person get a cut, they would bother me more than they would bother them. You know, so this is something I had to deal with. You know, knowing my innocence, you know, I couldn't cry out. I couldn't ask for help from my oppressors because I was surely been put to death. And many times my food was tampered with and my water was deliberately shut off. But that's the reality of death row and prison. You know, they got supermax units out here now, so to my understanding, from what I witnessed, they escalated to torment and abuse. You know what I mean? It sounds the blood of the poor. You know, because we know and we understand. I don't know how many of us accept it, but only the poor people is locked up in the belly of the beast. There's no millionaires in prison or in death row or doing life. You know, at one point, I was taught how to apply myself in the belly of the beast and deal with the torment of death row and witnessing the punishment and affliction of my people and others who suffered the same. So I learned how to deal with the law library issues, and I learned how to read the laws and the rules and the practices and the procedures. I took up on the battle and fighting for our civil rights. And many times I was punished, placed in solitary confinement in extremely cold conditions. And at one point in time, I was put in a RHU cell, restricted housing unit, around their general population, inmates, and I decided to wake up the dead. They put me in another cell, a plexiglass cell, a phase 2 cell, and I put my paperwork together, and they was really upset about that. But they had to move me out to a death row cell. And the death row cell is a cell with plexiglass in the front of it. When you holler and scream or whatever, you got to call for somebody, ain't nobody gonna hear you. When breakfast is served, they pass you by because they know that you're in there to be tormented. You know what I mean? To a high degree than those who sit in the other cells outside of that plexiglass. You know, and I searched this RHU cell, and I found pieces of a book was under the mattress. It was stuck in the mattress. The mattress was actually ripped and there was a book stuck in the mattress. And, you know, a lot of pieces was missing of this book. And I remember the book was called 10,000 Seasons. And it was about your African heritage. It was about the religion of Africans. It was about the wisdom and unity of life. It was about survival and how we struggle and how we go to war. And you know, it had articles in this book about women running tribes of men, the gold and the silver that they own. And I was like astonished. I'm like, I got all this time, you know, in this restricted housing unit. Then it went to a section about the crown. Oh my God, the crown. And then you showed you pictures of all this beauty of locks and thousands of years of how the lock was worn by men and women, and how they soldiered, and how the hair kept you warm, that you didn't need a hat, and how the hair of the lock generated the power and the energy that you needed when your enemies came to attack you. I mean, 10,000 Seasons was a gift of my ancestors. You know, that day, the next day, I sat on my bunk with all this time, this restricted housing unit, and I just twist. I had a bush, always wore a bush. You know, back in the Black Panthers days, I wore this bush, and I was always late for school. Black Panthers would give out free food. You had to go to church now on Lombard Street, 21st and Lombard or something like that. And everybody in the community would meet up at this church, all of the brothers and the sisters. And I never got the pancakes because I was in the mirror. I get this right. No, it ain't right. And, you know, every time I come out the house, you know, when I got the bush right, everybody from up down Lombard Street get me to go to school. You know what I mean? So I missed out on that. But back to what I was saying, you know, I sat down on that bunk and I twisted my locks and I twisted up that bush. I twisted and I twisted. And I looked in the mirror and I said, that's like move. Wait till movie, did you all see this? I call it move, big move. Wait till move see this. And I came out my cell at 2:30 that day to go to the law library. And the guard said, Wilson, you don't want to do that. I said, what you mean? You don't want to do that. When I got in the cell, I smiled. I said, oh yeah, I want to do this. You know, so it was 7.5 years. You know, I had locks down my back. On May 13th, before May 13th, I was given a new trial based on ineffective assistance of counsel. I was given a new sentencing phase hearing and took away the death penalty. And they had the opportunity to take me to trial and give me that death penalty back. Well, that didn't happen. In that period of time, the videotape, for political reasons, was turned over to a lot of death penalty litigating attorneys. And it showed the district attorney who tried and got me convicted of 3 counts of first-degree murder and acquitted of robbery, training other DAs how to discriminate, use race discrimination and gender discrimination in death penalty cases. This was none other than the notorious Jack McMahon in the Philadelphia District Attorney's Office. That training tape, through the litigations of my court-appointed attorneys, Defenders Association, the Capital Case Habeas Corpus Unit, Rob Dunningham and Mary Henson, got me a new trial. Through that new trial, I continued to litigate and submit legal work to my attorneys, and they submitted a motion for double jeopardy to dismiss the charges against me and bar the Commonwealth from retrying me on the new trial issues. The court denied that. I came back again with another motion for double jeopardy, barring the Commonwealth from seeking the death penalty based on the practice and the misconducts of the race discrimination and the long duration of years I spent on death row, and my witnesses dying and family members is dying. People that would have came to testify on my behalf and perhaps showed, helped me get a fair trial at the second trial. My second trial was listed in the docket, court docket, for May 13th. May 13th was a Bureau attack, a move. That second trial ended in a mistrial for the vicious Commonwealth trying to violating the evidence rule. My third trial began on Halloween Day, October 31st, 2005. At that point, I was told by my attorneys that they wanted to present me before a jury in a light favorable to the defense. In other words, to be accepted, that I had to cut my 7.5 year dreadlocks, and I had to make a decision before I started the new trial, before we came about to pick this new jury. You know, I talked to my family, I talked to people around me, and I'm like, wow, why I gotta do this? You know, I came into the understanding that my ancestors, through my torment, through my abuse, through me knowing that my innocence and watching the torment and abuse and the violation of my people's civil rights under the cruel design of what they call the justice system. I witnessed the injustice of human beings. I witnessed the first time I ever smelled burning flesh was on death row, from a man to being denied a cigarette. So he burnt himself alive. Now, he got two hardball ass Caucasian attorneys, and they telling me, Wilson, we want you to cut your locks, get a haircut. We want to put you in a suit. You know, I'm in the county, so I can't go talk to Moo about it. I can't talk to none of the other brothers about it that, you know what I mean, watch me grow my locks. You know, all the ones would say, brother, why you want to do that? You know what I mean? They used to call me Little Malcolm X. Some people used to tell me, you ain't Malcolm X. I said, you're right, because I got to walk in my own footsteps. I got to write the pages to my own book. You know, but I'm not going to sit here and just let what go down, go down. You know, I did without a TV and a radio for 12.5 years. So I ain't had nothing to do but be a pain in the ass to my oppressors. And I'm not talking about throwing poop. I'm not talking about throwing urine. I'm talking about standing up and giving them what they claim is supposed to be so powerful, the Constitution of the United States. Their rules and their regulations that we supposed to be governed by as human beings. Under the leadership of Mumia Abu-Jamal and a lot of other brothers with that same spirit and willingness to fight for their freedom and the freedom of others. But I'm still trying to deal with the issue of cutting my locks. You know, because in the winter my locks kept me warm. When they throw me in those tormented cells with the freezing cold temperatures that were so cold that I could take an ink pen and scratch the inside of my window ice off. Those locks helped me survive because it generated heat in my body that I need. When I was putting plastic on my feet and wearing all my death row state issue clothing, those locks kept me warm. But now, to win my freedom for this new trial, I gotta cut my locks. Well, I wound up clipping one lock at a time. And I started from the sides. One side a week, I worked in the inmates' kitchen and part-time in the county law library. So I cut a little lock here, a little lock there. Look in the mirror, yeah, man, I ain't giving this up. I can't do it. You know, and my pod officer came to me and said, "How you want some razor blades?" I said, "Yeah, I need something because I'm not cutting my locks. I'm not going to no barber and I'm not cutting my locks. We lock down and I clip some more. Well, I'm going to do it like this. I clipped everything on the side. I left the back, it's tied up in the ponytail. I said, "Oh, I still look like I'm representing." "Yeah, I'm representing the ancestors." I said, "I got to go down." Well, I've been down. I witnessed the torment, I witnessed the death, I witnessed the warrants getting signed. So how low can you go? I made the decision to cut my locks for my freedom. Be able to hold my son and my daughter who was 2 and 3 years old when I was arrested. I went to the police station, gave a statement, and I thought I was going to be able to change my little baby's pampers. You know, after 17 and a half years, she ain't wearing pampers no more. You know, and all these things I thought about. Wow. I get to hug my mom. Last time I hugged my mom was when I walked into the police station on the assumption that my attorney was going to be there. And he wasn't. So I never saw the streets again. I never walked on the streets until 17 and a half years later. But the jury acquitted me of all charges based on the DNA evidence and the witnesses came forward who owned the coat that the Commonwealth in my first trial presented as circumstantial evidence that it was the blood of the victims. Owner came up with, that owned the coat, he testified to the fact where he left the coat at. The coat was allegedly supposed to be found in my mother's basement. The warrants was fabricated and forged. There's no signatures of my family members on the warrants. Everything was typed in. You know, many times I asked my parents, well, where did they get this coat from? Son, they went down the basement in your little room. And that's where they got it from. I said, "What you mean they went down the basement?" He said, "Well, they came up with the coat from the basement. They had it in the bag." I said, "Oh, yeah." I said, "Well, where did the bag come from? You gave them a bag?" No, they came in with the bag. So we challenged the evidence of the coat being planted. I had 2 college students that was going to school for DNA testing, DNA training. And at that point, they gave their verdict and I broke down because they said not guilty of all charges. My mother threw her hands up in the air, hallelujah. My sister bowed her head in prayer. I was released from the county prison at 9:30 at night. They gave me 65 cents a token for 17 and a half years suffering. In the belly of the beast. Falsely accused of 3 counts of first-degree murder for my friends, Dorothea Swell, Cynthia Goins, and Tyrone Mason. And only by the grace of God and wisdom and the knowledge of my ancestors and the brothers who took me under their wings and showed me how to survive on Pennsylvania's death row, in the dungeon of the dead, and with the voice of the voiceless. You know, I stand here today as a revolutionary for equal justice and save the blood of the poor. You know, I'm trying to build the R.C. Wilson Foundation. I deal with inmates. They send me their artwork. I've now been approved as a Philadelphia Prison Society member. I sit on the board as a representative, a board member, a witness to innocence. And I do what I do. I've been out here in this society for 11 months now. In 2005, I called Pam Africa and said, Pam, this is Brother Amin, and I want to know what I can do. So this is what you see now is what I do. You know, I try to educate the people. I try to give them the understanding and the education that they need to fight against the death penalty, to realize the brutal torment that lifers and death row prisoners have to suffer and endure under this cruel and brutal design of the criminal and justice system. You know, I also want to take this opportunity to direct you to some organizations that might be helpful, so maybe you can assist some of the brothers in their plight. Canada Coalition Against the Death Penalty, they support death row inmates. National Center Against the Death Penalty, they support death row inmates and lifers. Death Penalty Information Center and the Journey of Hope. The Journey of Hope is an organization of brothers and sisters that dealt with the violence and also exonerated from all over the state. With that, I'd like to say on the move, free all political prisoners, democracy now, in the U.S., and the war, the struggle continues. Peace.